Hi, bestie. How are you doing today? I hope you're having a fantastic day. Welcome back to the Best Friend Book Club. I'm so happy you made it. I'm Sarah, and today we're going to be diving into a chapter by chapter summary of everything that happens in Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Now, this will not contain spoilers for the rest of the series. This is just a chapter by chapter summary of this book, but there will be spoilers for this book, obviously. If you are interested in seeing episodes a few days early, or you want access to my theories, PDFs, or my summaries, you can check out Patreon. It's going to be patreon.com/bestfriendbookclubpodcast. And let's just jump right in. We got a lot to cover, so let's go. So we start off with part 1, The King's Champion. So we are following the King's Champion through this manor in Belhaven, and we find out this belongs to Lord Nerral, and she's sneaking into his bedroom where she sees him and his wife asleep, and she pulls out her sword and his eyes fly open. That is where we're left with that. We then have Selena going to see the king, and Dorian is with the king. Kale is guarding them, duh. And she's showing proof to the king that she killed Lord Nerral and his wife. So she provides a severed head and then a hand with Lord Nerral's seal ring on it, and for his wife, a hand with their wedding band on it. So the king gives her a new assignment, and she needs to take down the rebel movement that is happening in Rifthold. And he only gives her one name at a time. The first name on that list is going to be Archer Finn, which is someone that she knows from her past. Then we have Dorian's point of view. After all of this, he's thinking about how Selena doesn't seem like herself, and he starts to wonder if he ever meant anything to her, because she's showing the king this much colder, the assassin, like she's showing this colder side of herself, and Dorian's like, did I ever mean anything to her, or was this all just to get what she wanted? He thinks if she could kill people, then manipulating people shouldn't have been that hard. We then have Kale following Selena down to the sewers where she disposes of these body parts. And he wants details on her mission. He's ready for the debrief. And he heard rumors that they caught Lord Nerral's killer, and he thought they meant her. So he was getting ready to go find her. Oh my god, guys, I'm so sorry, but I fear I am down bad. When Selena is finally alone in her room, we find out that in the last 2 months of being the King's Champion, that she hasn't actually killed any of her 4 targets. She's given them all the option of death or fake your death and escape, never use your name again. And all of them have taken that second option. So she would just get the dead bodies from these sick houses and make it look consistent with the story that she was giving the king. And she's been able to get away with it. And she's wondering what she'll do now that her targets are in Rifthold, because she's had to travel far to go get her targets before. And it allowed the body to decompose to a point where she could kind of get away with it not being the exact person. The next morning at dawn, she meets with Nehemia out in the game park while she's playing fetch with Fleetfoot. And her and Nehemia briefly discuss this list that the king has of these rebels. So then Nehemia tells her that more and more Eelway rebels are being sent to Calaculla, which is the sister camp to Endovier. So Nehemia is trying to figure out when she needs to act against the king, when she needs to make her big move for the sake of her people, to which Selena doesn't really have much of a response. She doesn't seem to want to really get involved in this. Nehemia ends up leaving, and Selena's thinking about her run with Kale that morning and going into Rifthold to spend the money that she just got for killing Lord Nerral. So Selena and Kale are on their run, and he's thinking about how over time she's starting to mean more and more to him. Okay. He then asks her how often she thinks about the people that she's killed, because he can't stop thinking about Cain. But the thing is, he would do it again to save her life. So she tells him that he'll never forget killing Cain, but she'll also never forget what he did to save her. So I think what he's just grappling with is I don't feel bad about it. And that's where he's really caught up. He then internally debates what a relationship with Selena would mean, with potentially having to choose between her and his loyalty to the crown. He also doesn't want to betray Dorian, because Dorian and Selena had a little bit of a thing going on, so he doesn't want to step on any toes. Dorian ends up finding them in the gardens, and he's accompanied by his cousin, Lord Roland Haviliard of Maya. So we find out that Roland has been offered a position on the king's council. And Roland is getting a little flirtatious with Celaena. Chaol is not having that, so he immediately leads her away, and she's kind of icked out by him. But we're told repeatedly, oh, Roland's harmless. And then Roland asks Dorian a little bit about this Lillian, because she's introduced as Lillian. But he doesn't really provide that much information to him. He doesn't tell too much about Celaena. So then Dorian is in Celaena's room after she comes back from a day of shopping. She knows that in the last 2 months since she ended things with him, she just misses him. She misses his company, not the kissing and the flirting, but the friendship that they had. He wants to spend time with her and just be friends. And when he asks to hang out, she says that she has other plans. So she's not really vibing, I guess. He asks her, he's like, do you want me to fight for you? And she says, no, I want to be left alone. And he just quietly leaves her room. Heartbreak. I am heartbroken because he's like, what do you want? Do you want me to fight for you? And she's like, no, just leave me alone. Oh, Dorian. So then later on, Celaena is on a rooftop in Rifthold and she's tracking Archer's movements. So this is the target that the king gave her. And she's thinking about the last time she was doing this in Rifthold and how Sam was alive. She feels like she could just look over her shoulder and Sam would be there. Later that evening, Celaena is in Chaol's room after dinner, and she's looking at the information that she has on Archer, while Chaol works on something else. We don't know what Chaol's doing. She asks him if he knows about Rourke Farron. Now, we kind of get filled in a little bit here, but if you read Assassin's Blade before, this all kind of is just a refresher. But Rourke is a crime lord, and Chaol tells her that he was killed 9 months ago by a man named Wesley. And Wesley used to be Arobin Hamel's personal guard. So she talks a little bit about the night that she was captured and then tells Chaol about Sam. So Chaol then tells Celaena that the reason he doesn't like Roland is because the lady friend that he was interested in ended up sleeping with Roland and he caught them in bed together. Kind of cementing the idea that he will always be second choice to a Haviliard. So that just, yikes. He ends up walking her back to her room. After a few minutes, she then decides to go to the library. So she's by herself in her room and then is like, you know what, let me go to the library. But she ends up seeing a hooded figure in the hall that makes the eye of Elena glow. She dips. She's not sticking around to find out what that is. She then decides to go to Elena's tomb to get some of her questions answered. So when she gets there, she meets the talking door knocker named Mort, and he was put there by Brannon to watch over Elena's tomb. So she goes into the tomb expecting to find Elena, but apparently Elena's powers have been basically diminished from the last time that she saved Celaena. But she gave Mort a message to give to Celaena, which is basically find the king's source of power and what he plans to do before it's too late. Thanks so much for that, Elena. Couldn't have done it without you. And as he's leaving, Mort asked why she even came there that night. Was it for herself or was it to help them all? So he then brings up her parents and she gets very upset and storms off. So this is going to be a running theme of, are you just looking out for yourself or the greater good of everyone? So Celaena makes a plan to run into Archer at the spot that she knows he goes to for his tea. And she gets all dressed up. She has Chaol go with her and they pretend to have a reservation and accidentally bump into him outside. So Archer recognizes her and they kind of catch up and she asks him if he wants to get dinner the next night, to which he says yes. So all of this seems to rub Chaol the wrong way. It's starting to seem like maybe he's getting a little jealous. So Celaena is then asked to be part of the guard for the state dinner that the king's having in the Great Hall. So I didn't know that as the assassin, as the king's champion, she'd also be asked to basically be part of the king's guard, but love that. And she's attending this dinner, she's working. And she's looking back and forth from Dorian to Roland. It's Dorian and Roland and then Chaol. So she's looking back and forth between the two. But then we switch over to Dorian's point of view. And he notices that Celaena's face softens whenever she sees Chaol. And this fills him with some negative emotions and he leaves the dinner in a hurry. Celaena then follows after him and they talk to each other in the hallway where she tells him that she doesn't trust Roland. And he's internally thinking about how long she's been yearning for his friend. ugh. They kind of get into an argument about them ending things where she says this is the one time he didn't get what he wanted, so he's upset. And he argues that she never let him tell her what he wanted. And still to this day, I guess to this day, we don't know what he wanted. So Selena then goes to visit Kaltain in her cell, and Kaltain's been there for the last 2 months. So Selena tries to talk to Kaltain and ask her what she knows about Roland. And Kaltain says that none of them in the castle can be trusted, but Roland least of all, and that the things that he has done would make even Selena's stomach turn. So I need to know the history on Roland. We also find out that the night guard, they turn a blind eye when Parrington comes to visit, and Kaltain has bruises that are shaped like hands on her wrists. Selena ends up giving Kaltain a cloak to keep her warm, and Kaltain's parting words are, something is coming and she is to greet it. So Selena just thinks, you're going insane. She then goes and tells Kale about what's going on with the guards, and he comes back to his room with bloody knuckles and a rumpled shirt because he handled business as he should. Nehemia and Selena then have breakfast in bed together and talk a little bit about Roland being appointed to the King's Council and how he's basically been assigned to placate Nehemia. That is his sole job, it seems. Now, Selena needs to get ready for her dinner with Archer. We switch over to Dorian and Kale, and they're avoiding Holland because he just came back from school and he's apparently a menace. They briefly discuss this dinner that they're having in Holland's honor and that they both don't want to go. Then the topic of Selena is brought up, and they both were clearly avoiding it. They both agree that they're worried about her, and it seems like Kale's a little bit more worried about her than Dorian, but he's worried about her going out on this dinner thing with Archer. So Selena gets into her little date night gown, and it's a little scandalous, and Kale tells her, he's like, you're not going out like that. To which she says, okay. She's not the one to tell that to. She insinuates to Kale that she will be spending the night at Archer's place and like, don't wait up for me. Don't wait up for me. I'm leaving. She then has her dinner with Archer, and they're clearly flirting with each other. They take his carriage back to his townhouse, and they're pulled up right in front of it. To then, at this moment, Selena tells him, yeah, so the king sent me to kill you. Archer immediately freaks out. He pulls a dagger on her, tells her that he'll pay her, and she gives him the option. Fake your death. Fake your death immediately, or fake your death at the end of the month. She did not give him the option of, I will just kill you. Not yet, anyways. And him waiting till the end of the month, he has to then provide her with information on this rebel movement. So that's kind of what they're trading off. So he then tells her about this group in Terrasen that says Aelin Galathinius, the lost heir of Terrasen, is essentially rallying the troops. To which Selena's like, that's bullshit because she's dead. Archer then invites her to this ball that one of his clients is having because they seem to know something about this rebel movement. So he's like, I'll just take you with me and you can snoop around there. After her date, she goes to Kale's room and she finds him pacing in his room, and she tells him everything that she learned, minus the little thing about Aelin reestablishing her court. And he tells her to be careful. And she gets a little upset at this because basically she's saying that he's implying that she's someone who can't protect herself. And he says that he worries about her because he cares about her, that he will always tell her to be careful because he'll always care what happens to her. You guys can't make me hate Kale. To the Kale haters, explain why, because I love this man. Like, him pacing in the room because he thought Archer and Selena were hanging out back at his townhouse. Ugh! So then Archer and Selena attend this ball together, which of course is a masquerade because it's not a fantasy book without a masquerade ball. It is being held by this guy named Davis. Okay. And Archer is able to get Selena into Davis's office, where she finds a book with word marks on it and a phrase on the inside of the book that says, "It is only with the eye that one can see rightly." She's then caught in the office by Davis. He ends up slicing her arm with a poison blade, and it's Gloriella poisoning, which is going to eventually cause paralysis. So she's able to escape, make it back to the castle, and she gets to Kale's office, where she ends up telling him just one word. She just says Gloriella and collapses. She was thinking to herself she had to get to where she knew she would be safe, and she ends up in Kale's office. So then Kale's point of view, he's freaking out because she has blood all over her. Oh, forgot to say this part. When Davis slices her with the knife, they end up getting into a scuffle and she fully kills Davis. And then she escapes to Kale's office. So then Kale's point of view, he's freaking out because Selena has blood all over her and he doesn't know where it's coming from. So he ends up cutting her dress off of her to see that there's only the one cut on her arm. He calls for a healer, wraps her in his cloak, and takes her up to her room where she's then given the antidote, and he holds her hair back while she throws up and then holds her while she sleeps. I'm unwell. Okay. He eventually then switches over to a chair and kind of just, the classic, he's just sitting in the chair while she's sleeping. Love that. And then Selena wakes up and Kale asks if she killed Davis because she was caught and then drugged. And when she says yes, he tells her that if she scares him like that again, he'll throw her in the dungeon. Foreshadowing? And Selena doesn't remember even making it to the castle. She just remembers wanting to get somewhere safe, and she ended up with Kale. So Selena then decides to go to the library to find out about whoever it was that she saw the other night in that dark cloak. She's making her way around the perimeter of the entire library to see if there's any way to access this second library that Kale told her about. And she's going around, she knows what's up. She's trying to find a secret passage. She's pushing on things. She's like, hello. She's pulling random books out, seeing if a door opens. And then we cut to Dorian's point of view. He has a nightmare and he wakes up to the entire bedroom being cold. His breath is clouding in front of him. And when he gets up, he could have sworn he saw a ring of frost where his body had been. But when he looked closer, it was gone. Interesting. So Selena then comes across this tapestry in the library that then leads to a secret passage, and she travels down the stairs and sees several bookcases, and the walls had depictions of fae that were dancing and lounging. She then comes across a single door made of iron that has a handle but no key lock, like no spot for a key, and the door is locked. She sticks her dagger under the door because she sees like a shadow moving back and forth, and she ends up seeing green eyes. She gets spooked and she leaves, but she convinces herself that this was just a rat or something like that. I swear the king and queen are doing the most for Holland coming back. I guess it's mostly the queen, but they end up having this performer come and sing. Her name is Rena Goldsmith, and Selena really wanted to see her perform because she's seen her in the past. So Rena starts to sing her songs of faraway lands, which makes Selena really emotional. And she's comforted by Kale. He holds her hand under the table and they look into each other's eyes. We then cut to Dorian's point of view, and he's watching this all happen, watching this all meaning between Kale and Selena. And he realizes that they have feelings for each other, and he decides to let Selena go, or the thought of being with her. So this is when it says, like, he closed his eyes and let her go. He moved on quite quickly, or made the decision to move on quite quickly. So Rena dedicates a song to the royal family, and the song is about a fae woman who served kings, and it was basically used to win battles, and she eventually meets a knight who sees her for who she was, not what she was, and he wins her heart that way. Then we switch over to the king's point of view, and he's executing Rena after her performance, and she's listing all of the people that were close to her that were executed under his orders. So she's like, my sister, this is how old she was. This is how she was killed. My nephew, this is how old he was. This is how he was killed. And she's just going like that up until she gets her head cut off. We then go back to Nehemia and Selena. They're having breakfast, and Nehemia is telling Selena it's getting harder and harder to stay friends with her, knowing that she's killing these people. So then Selena ends up confessing that she hasn't actually killed anybody, and then takes Nehemia to Elena's tomb. She's like, I haven't been killing anybody, and let me show you something. So Selena notices that the stars on the floor are constellations, and when you step on the stag, which is the symbol of Terrasen, where Elena is from, a face appears with an eye hollowed out, and when she looks through it, she doesn't see anything, and she asks Mort, what's up with that? And he says that she basically needs to come up with better questions so that he can answer them for her. But this is her trying to figure out that riddle. It is only with the eye that one can see rightly. They go back to her room and she gets a letter from Archer with a list of men to look into as like them being involved in the rebel movement. So she then spends that evening tracking them down, briefly watching them before returning to the castle to find out that she used to be on guard duty again for the royal ball that night. So Kale is on guard for this royal ball and notices that Selena is missing. He finds her dancing in the gardens by herself, and then he asks her to dance with him. Can you hear the smile while I'm saying all that? So then we cut over to Dorian's point of view, and he's watching them dance together when Nehemia joins him, and she asks him to talk to his father about this idea to expand the labor camps in Calaculla, but Dorian says that he can't. So she asks him if he would save Selena if she were sent back, and he says, of course. And she reminds him that everyone who is in Calaculla and in Dovier have people who love them the way Dorian loved Selena. She did use the past tense when she was talking to him about the way he loved Selena. So then Nehemia traces a symbol onto his chest and tells him that he has more power in him than he realizes and to not be afraid when the time comes. After all this, Selena then goes to visit Archer and basically tells him that he has 6 days to get her information or he will not like the next visit that he gets from her. We then have Dorian's point of view during this council meeting where we see that Roland is also wearing a black ring on his finger, similar to the one that Kane had and then Parrington and the king have, and that they're pushing to expand Calaculla. So Dorian speaks out against this and is then reprimanded by his father. He then leaves the meeting, punches the wall, and it turns into this like spiderweb effect on the wall and shatters the window next to it. Strange. So we cut to Selena and she's on the couch with Kale and she requests some chocolate cake and he goes to get it for her, and she thinks if there were more men like Kale in the world, then someone like Nehemia could raise a court that values honor and loyalty and doesn't operate on obedience and fear. She also realizes at this point that she wants a life with Kale. She goes back to her room and finds Dorian sitting on the floor outside, and it's apparently super cold in this hallway, and he was looking for Nehemia, but because she's not there, he decides to leave. She asks him if he wants to talk about it, but he just ends up leaving. So then Kale has a meeting with the king, and the king tells him that he wants Kale to keep a close eye on Nehemia because allegedly there has been some type of anonymous threat on her life, but he's not allowed to tell Nehemia that. So we then go to Dorian's point of view where he's sparring with Roland. Well, no, he's sparring and then Roland joins him and tells him that he called off the vote after Dorian left. So Roland is very much starting to cement this idea that he is on Dorian's side. So Dorian then excuses himself, makes his way through the courtyard where a carnival is being set up for Holland by the queen. Kale ends up finding him there, and they're joined by Selena. They meet Baba Yellowlegs, who's trying to get them into her house of mirrors to give them their fortune. She has yellow legs, iron teeth, and silver hair. So Selena is kind of put on edge by this whole encounter. They end up going to the stables where Dorian gifts Kale an Asterian stallion for his birthday that's in 2 days. And then Dorian's like, oh, Kale, do you have any plans for your birthday? And Selena's like, yeah, we do. We, the two of us. Yikes, not cutting Dorian out of the throuple. She then decides to go down to the tomb to see if her necklace, the Eye of Elena, will fit into the eye of the stone face. So Selena goes down to the tomb, puts the Eye of Elena into the carved face, but it does not work. Mort is kind of teasing her, and she's trying to figure it out, but he tells her that she still hasn't asked the right questions. She gets frustrated and storms off. So Selena then has a dream about seeing a white stag across a ravine and then starts to hear rushing water. She had the same dream on this day every single year since her parents had passed. She wakes up, leaves the castle long before dawn, and then we switch to Kale's point of view where he goes to her room because she was late for the morning run. He goes looking to find her, but then finds Nehemia in her room, and Nehemia tells Kale that this is the 10th anniversary of her parents' death. Kale talks to Nehemia for a little bit and asks how she knows about her parents, meaning Selena's parents, and Nehemia basically tells him that some things you see with your eyes, others you feel with your heart. and he notices that she's reading a book with strange symbols in it, but doesn't really seem to think much of it. So we have Celaena in the foothills above Rifthold when she starts to think about the day that she snapped in Endovier, which was the anniversary of her parents' death as well. So she never planned on making it out alive that day that she snapped. She was basically just trying to cause as much damage as possible. And in doing so, justify them killing her even though they were given orders not to. So Chaol was waiting for her in her room when she got back, and he had chocolate cake waiting there for her, and he embraces her and says he'll spend the night on the couch in her room to keep her company. So Dorian is in the library, and he's going through his family's genealogical charts, trying to figure out where magic could have possibly entered the bloodline. So the Haviliard bloodline didn't have a ton of magic other than people marrying in, but the Galathinius bloodline had a lot. So the Haviliard one was from Gavin, I believe, and the Galathinius line is from Elena. He recalls once meeting Aelin Galathinius and her cousin Adian, but the memory was hazy since it was so long ago. When he's done, the library gets cold and books start flying off the shelves, and he doesn't know where all this is coming from, but he makes a decision that he needs to go talk to Baba Yellowlegs to get answers. So it's now Chaol's birthday, and Celaena has set up a rooftop dinner for two, and they enjoy their meal together. They're looking out over Rifthold when Celaena tells Chaol that she hasn't actually killed any of her targets. Happy birthday, bud. And he tells her that she's absolutely mad. So then Chaol starts to freak out a little bit because he's worried that the king will kill her when he finds out that she's been doing this. And he thinks that the king would make him be the one to swing the sword since they're so close, which honestly, I could see. Celaena suggests that she'll use the information she gets from Archer as leverage to shorten her contract before she leaves, and that basically the king won't know that she did that until she's long gone. Chaol says that he will go with her wherever it is she decides to go. He ends up kissing her on the rooftop, and it switches to Celaena's point of view, and she says the kiss obliterated her. They eventually make their way back to the carriage and then to the castle, where she invites him into her room and allegedly gives him everything she has. They wake up the next morning and agree to keep this relationship a secret, and he tells her that he knew he wanted her at Yulmus, and she's still trying to figure out when exactly the moment was that she realized she wanted him, because it had always been Chaol from the very beginning. We switch back over to Dorian, and he goes to visit Baba Yellowlegs and asks about magic, what would happen if someone had signs of magic, and she says that she would keep it under wraps for fear of being killed by the king. And when he leaves, he sees Roland was watching them. Then Celaena sees the men from Archer's list fleeing at the docks, and then Archer's like, oh, hey, you're here. He says that he warned all of the people that he gave her on the list, which is actually crazy, and he couldn't have their blood on his hands, and Celaena's like, you better get me some fucking useful information, and soon, or I will kill you. Okay. She then goes back to the castle, pulls Chaol out of a meeting. She's like, oh, the king needs to speak to you. They go into a broom closet, and then it cuts to her telling Nehemia, and Nehemia's like, a broom closet? I love this so much. And she's talking about how she feels so happy. Nehemia tells her that the king asked her to speak to the rebels to stop what they're doing, and she asks Celaena to help raise an army against the king, to which Celaena refuses. And then Nehemia calls her a selfish coward. Then we have this chapter where we don't know exactly who's talking to who, but we can kind of piece it together. A princess is talking to the queen in a tomb. They discuss either the prince or some mystery girl needs to break, and the princess understands what needs to be done. So that'll come into play later. So Chaol is in the game park hunting with the king, Roland, Dorian, and Parrington. And the king tells Chaol that he's having Nehemia questioned the next day, and he needs 6 guards and 0 distractions, which he means keep Celaena far away and don't tell Celaena. So then Dorian catches up to Chaol, and he asks him where he's been because they haven't seen each other around. Where the hell you been, Loca? Dorian tells Kale to treat her well, meaning Selena. So Dorian's kind of able to piece together, like, he knows what's going on. Later that night, Kale gets out of bed, leaves Selena in the bed. He gets out of bed and he's just thinking about what the king told him. And he thinks that it's a test to see if he'll tell Selena and Nehemia to see where his loyalties lie. He then starts to think about Selena being his wife and ultimately the mother of his children when someone grabs him and presses something cold against his nose. So Selena wakes up the next morning in Kale's bed and goes about her day. Around 10 p.m. is when she notices, really haven't heard from him. And she starts to get concerned and she starts thinking of Sam. She runs to Kale's room and finds a note from someone claiming to have the captain of the guard in a warehouse in the slums. So we then switch to Kale's point of view, and he's in chains with about 30 people that are in cloaks and their faces are covered. They're all just hanging around this warehouse. They beat him and they seem to be just waiting around for someone to show up. So when he pieces together that they're waiting for Selena, he threatens to kill all of them with his bare hands. And they're like, she's just one girl. But Kale is confident that she's going to come in here and hand them their asses. So then we have Selena's point of view, and she absolutely loses it on everyone in the warehouse. Love. And there's an old man trying to stop the men from attacking her instead of trying to stop her from attacking the men. All of a sudden, guess who shows up but Archer, who then reveals that he's been working with Nehemia for the last 6 months to build this rebel movement against the king, and this will eventually move into Terracin. Well, they're like going to rally the troops or something. I don't know. Kale is then removed from his shackles, and Archer reveals that Kale knew about this threat on Nehemia's life, and he said nothing. He's trying to turn Selena and Kale on each other. Archer then reveals that Nehemia had just been taking all of the information that Selena was giving her and using it for this rebel movement, which of course is going to just make Selena feel used. Selena starts to piece together that Nehemia wasn't in a rush to solve this riddle and that she'd been missing from the castle a bunch. So Kale knew that Nehemia was going to be questioned, but that was all he knew. And Selena keeps asking, "Where's Nehemia? Where's Nehemia?" To which Archer responds, "I'm sorry." We then have one of, I think, the most impactful scenes where Selena is racing through the streets to make it back to Nehemia. I literally have chills. And she's pulling her weapons off of her, anything that would slow her down. And she could swear that she hears hooves behind her as she's running to get to the castle. Her goal is to get Nehemia to safety and protect her from this nameless threat. But she gets to Nehemia's room to find both Nehemia's guards and Nehemia dead. And that is where we leave part 1, moving into part 2, the Queen's Arrow. So Selena is looking at Nehemia's body while people rush into the room. Dorian crouches before her, and she puts her hand on the side of his neck and then thinks about how his throat is exposed, and they allowed this to happen. Then Kale comes in, and he has his hand on his sword, and he's like, Selena, Selena. And then she remembers that he had known this would happen, and she throws herself at him. So they're fighting. And I mean, they're fighting, like she's clearly attacking him and he's like just trying to get her off of him. The whole time that they're fighting, the guards are trying to step in, but Kale keeps telling them to stay back. Kale reminds Selena that he's her friend, and she says, "You will never be my friend. You will always be my enemy." She's eventually on top of him, trying to plunge a knife into his chest when some invisible force stops her. There's a sudden chill in the room, and then Selena is knocked out by one of the guards. Kale ends up putting Selena in the dungeons, then having this conversation with Dorian about everything that led up to this moment. So Dorian reassures him that it wasn't the king that did this because he was with his dad the whole time. So there's no way it could have been the king. So they're trying to figure out how this happened, basically. Selena wakes up in the dungeon and talks with Kaltain a little bit. She complains about headaches and hearing these wings. Kaltain then tells Selena that the water they give her is going to be drugged with a sedative, and Selena willingly drinks this water every single time. So on the 4th day, Kale gets her out of the cell, brings her to her room while she's unconscious, and he realizes that he's lost her, and she'll never let him in again. I'm glad he came to that conclusion because, yeah, I mean, you got to put 2 and 2 together, bud. So Selena wakes up in her bed and is thinking about how she won't have breakfast with Nehemia anymore and is essentially mourning her best friend. She calls her twin soul. And she finds out that she missed Nehemia's funeral, and then she doesn't get out of bed that day or for at least the next 3 days. We then get the point of view of a slave girl in Kalakala when they find out that Princess Nehemia is dead and she was assassinated by Aderlin. That is what's being passed around in the mines. So the mines seem to fall silent, and when her overseer raises his whip to hit her, she starts reciting the names of her loved ones that have passed. I have, oh my God, chills. She adds her name to the end of the list and swings her axe into the overseer's gut. So this is the beginnings of us seeing some type of rioting in the mines after Nehemia's death. We then have Kale's point of view, and we're getting an update on Selena from Ress. And he said that she just started moving to the chair in front of the fireplace, but she's still not talking and she's barely eating. We find out that the king has summoned all of the southern lords to Rifthold, and that includes Kale's father. I believe it's because he's trying to figure out how to handle this whole thing with Nehemia. Then we go to Dorian's point of view, and this talks about how Roland has been backing him up in all of the council meetings, and Dorian got yelled at by his dad for suggesting they publicly apologize to Nehemia's parents for her death. Like, what a crazy thing to think. Yeah, maybe we should apologize to her parents because she died on our watch in our castle. But he tries to use his magic to move a pen later on and is unable to. So he seems to only be able to use it when his back is up against the wall, and he has to. So Selena's point of view is time passing at different speeds. So sometimes days go by super quick, others feel like a lifetime. And she's starting to think of who could have possibly murdered Nehemia. And she keeps thinking about the murder scene. And she thinks that it could have been Grave who competed in the competition in the last book. She finally gets up out of her chair. So this is the first time that she is leaving her room. She goes down to the tomb to grab some weapons, some gold, and then she grabs Damaris. She finds herself going to the vault, which is this kind of like underground area thing, like shady things happening over there, and they got some underground fighting, things like that. She talks to a bartender there who recognizes her, and she asks the bartender where Grave is. We switch over to Grave's point of view, and he's running from Selena. He thinks that he lost her. He's like, oh, I'm so fantastic. She then pulls up, slices his legs so that he can't run, and then uses daggers to pin each of his hands to the wall, and she wants to know who hired him. He isn't answering, so she's like, all right, pick a finger. Pick a finger. And he's pleading with her. She goes, oh, did you say your thumb? And then he says, I'll tell you everything. So then we have Selena walking right into the king's council holding Graves' head. She drops it in front of Mullison, who was Graves' sponsor in the competition. She then provides the king with a list of all the people that she killed in the warehouse to protect Kale, but she provides the list to be like, oh, I found all these traitors and I killed all of them. And she says that Archer gave her the list of traitors, and so that's kind of why she's keeping him alive. Mullison is then taken to the dungeons for his part in Nehemia's death. So Selena then goes to visit Archer and tells him that he has 5 days to be ready to fake his death. He asks her to join their cause, to which she says that she will not. Kale's point of view, while he has breakfast with his dad suggests that he comes back to Aniel, because basically his brother ain't shit. He's like, your brother's not really holding up to the standard that I thought he would, so you need to come back to Aniel. His dad brings up Selena, and Kale says that he'll make him wish he'd never set foot in the castle if he tries to even talk to Selena. So he's showing his whole hand. He's just like, showing his dad how much Selena means to him. So Selena ends up going to Nehemia's room to kind of pack up her stuff because there are people coming from Eelway to collect Nehemia's body and her belongings. She finds the same book that she found in Davis's office with writing in the front that says, do not trust, and there's a symbol that Nehemia drew that Selena thinks is the royal seal, and then again it says, it is only with the eye that one can see rightly. She goes to the tomb, and she puts the pommel of Damaris into the eye and can see a lengthy poem. So the hilt of Damaris is the shape of an eye. So she sees this lengthy poem about 3 things that were made by the Vogue and where they were hidden. And that's kind of all she can really piece together from that. Mort let it slip that Nehemia was the one to remove the Ritterak from the tomb, meaning that she had been there before Selena showed her the tomb. So then Queen Elena appears to Selena and tells her that Nehemia is no longer in pain. She's safe now. Selena ends up breaking down crying, and the queen comforts her. I thought that was a really sweet moment. So Selena ends up going to visit Nehemia's grave, and she sings this ancient song. We then have Cale's point of view as he watches this happen, and he keeps thinking about what he could have done differently to make this essentially not have happened. He ends up walking away when she notices that he's there. Dorian is in the library looking for books on magic, but he can't find any. Surprise, surprise, magic was literally outlawed by your father. Selena and Fleetfoot end up finding him in the library. They talk a little bit, and then we switch to Cale's point of view. Cale's in the library, a level above, watching all this happen, and he says that the conversation seems so easy between Dorian and Selena. And then Cale ends up finding the head librarian and asking him about books with songs for the dead, specifically for people from Terrasen, because he's trying to figure out the song that Selena was singing. The librarian tells him of the people from the High Court of Terrasen singing for the dead in the language of the Fae. So Cale keeps thinking about how Selena said that he will always be her enemy, and he's starting to think that she's from some type of noble house in Terrasen, which is how she knew that song, and all these other things that he's starting to piece together. So Selena is watching Archer's townhouse from the rooftops of Rifthold, and she notices that guy that had the twin blades from the warehouse that was guarding Cale. He's arguing with Archer. She takes note of that and then ends up going back to the castle to join Dorian in his tower for dinner. They talk a little bit about Roland, and it's mentioned that Roland has been complaining of headaches lately. We then get Dorian's point of view. Selena has fallen asleep on his couch, and he thought about how the scars of losing Nehemia and then Cale would go deeper than her physical scars. He's secretly glad that she wasn't seeing Cale anymore, and he hated himself for thinking that. Dorian and Cale having these feelings about the other one, having feelings for Selena, everything's so complicated. So then Selena then goes to the tomb and is trying to figure out this riddle. And after talking to Mort, she decides that she needs to find some type of seer or an oracle. And what do you know? What do they call it? The carnival? The carnival's still in town. So Selena goes to Baba Yellowlegs for some answers. She offers her 3 coins, and the witch calls her cheap. She's like, girl, what the hell? She goes to walk away, and then Baba Yellowlegs is like, well, the prince gave me 4 coins. And then Selena turns around and she's like, oh, and I'll also sell you the information that Dorian was looking for a price. So Selena ends up going into the caravan of mirrors where Baba Yellowlegs turns on the oven and tells Selena to start asking her questions. So Selena reads her this poem, and Baba Yellowlegs ends up telling her that it's about word keys that are used to open up word gates, or the word gate. She then explains that word gates are used to basically travel between worlds, and that the word keys were taken from the Vogue by the Fae Queen Maeve, and then she gave those 3 keys to Brannon to hide on the continent that he was from, so somewhere in Aderlin-ish. So Selena has gotten all the information that she needs, and she's now ready to knock Baba Yellowlegs' lights out, because she's trying to protect Dorian, because if she's willing to sell this information, anyone can just buy the information from her. But she's then hit with a heavy chain across the side of her head. So we then switch over to Dorian and Cale's point of view. They're having a conversation where Cale asks how Selena is doing, and Dorian says she's coping. We find out that Cale went to the library the night before, and he made a list of all the potential houses that Selena could have been from, and he keeps this list in his pocket. Dorian asks Cale if he's going to go back to Aniel with his father, and Cale's starting to question his loyalty to the crown. Because if his loyalty to the crown caused this rift between him and Selena and ultimately Nehemia's death, how loyal can he be to them? Okay, Cale. Selena wakes up and notices all of her weapons are missing, and she starts fighting with Baba Yellowlegs. She finds an axe on the wall that she uses to break all of the mirrors so that she can see exactly where the witch is. They end up getting into a scuffle, and Selena cuts off her head, and then she just looks to the oven. So then we have Selena going down to the tomb to keep thinking about this riddle, what it all means. Mort tells her that she's probably in a heap of trouble because she just killed the matron of the Iron Teeth witch clan. And he said that the Blue Bloods and the Black Beaks will probably want some answers for her killing Baba Yellowlegs. Kale goes to Selena's room, and she's not there. He decides to look through her desk for whatever reason, and he ends up finding her will, which was signed 2 days before Nehemiah's death, and it left everything to Kale. So Selena finds him in there, and she tells him that she doesn't plan on changing the will. He's able to piece together that she doesn't really have any plans of joining this rebel movement, because if she did join the rebel movement, she'd be marked as a traitor, and therefore her money would go back to the king and not to Kale. So she tells him to get out of her room. He barely makes it to a broom closet before he breaks down crying. And so the reason that he's so emotional about this is because her leaving it to him would mean that he wouldn't have to turn to his dad when he would be relieved of his position of the guard for ultimately supporting Selena. So Selena ends up finding The Walking Dead, the book from the last book, and finds a spell to unlock any door. So she goes down to that iron door in the secret passage in the library, and this leads to dozens of iron doors on both sides of the hallway, and then another iron door at the end that continues over and over. So she unlocks this one. There's iron doors on both sides, and at the end, there's one iron door. So she keeps going and going and going. At the last door, there's a spiral staircase that leads up, and she realizes that she's in the clock tower, and whatever it's made of is giving her a really bad headache. So we then go over to Dorian's point of view, and he followed Selena into the catacombs under the library. His magic is screaming at him to run, but he's determined to get her out of there. Selena starts running from the clock tower, trying to get back to the library. When she gets down the stairs, all of the lights have been extinguished. The lights that she lit on her way in, they're all out. So she then turns off her torch because she doesn't want to now be a beacon, and she can hear breathing that is not her own. We then get the point of view of this creature that's watching from the shadows, that's capable of using word marks, and has been watching Selena learn how to use them as well. The creature ends up attacking Selena. She cuts it with Damaris, and it has black blood, and she's racing through the catacombs to get back. So as she's running through the catacombs, she finds Dorian and tells him to run. They get to the final iron door, and they're pushing their body weight against it to hold the creature in. Dorian ends up using his magic to try to seal up the door. But so Selena ends up sending him to look for the Walking Dead, and then uses a binding spell to keep the creature in one spot, and then she's able to cut its head off. Afterwards, they go back to his room, and they're discussing everything that happened, and he shows her the genealogical charts that he found, and he wants to get his magic under control. They agree to take things day by day. So when Dorian showed Selena the Book of Noble Lineages, she noticed Kaltain's family had a strong magical line that apparently vanished 2 generations ago. Selena goes down to the dungeons to look for her and is reminded that Duke Parrington has taken Kaltain to be his wife, and he took her to Marath. He also took Roland with him, who shares Dorian's bloodline. So now she's starting to piece together that the king is probably using people who have strong magical bloodlines for something. We don't know what that something is just yet. So Selena then goes to the library and is making sure that the door is really locked. She just keeps checking it. And then she starts to think about the thing from Elena's tomb that says, time's rift, and decides there's only one being that can tell her if she's right or wrong about this idea she has. Selena goes down to the tomb, and she talks to Mort, and she says that it's an anagram. And the anagram is, I am the first. So it says that Elena is the first word key. So she opens up the crown of Elena's sarcophagus to find nothing there. Mort tells Selena that the king found it when he was 20 years old. They have a conversation and assume that he has 2 of the word keys, which is how he was able to stifle magic completely. They know he definitely has one. They think he has two, but they know for sure he does not have all three. She makes a plan to open a portal to another world, to talk to Nehemia and find out what she knows, say her goodbyes, all that juicy stuff. So Dorian is having a dream, and Gavin, the first king of Adarlan, appears to him and tells him exactly where to find Selena, how to go behind the tapestry. There's a little thing back there, third door on your right, all of that, because there's a line that's about to be crossed that would put the entire castle in jeopardy. So that's what he tells Dorian. Selena ends up opening a portal to summon Nehemia. Fleetfoot comes down to where she is, and Nehemia appears. So Nehemia is talking to her and tells her to never open this portal again. Something else can walk through. She then tells Selena before she leaves that she knew what her fate was, and she still ran toward it because certain events needed to be set into motion. She tells Selena that she was one of the bright lights for her in the past 10 years of darkness. I am unwell. The way I was boohoo crying. This is my reread, and I'm boohoo crying over this. She then hears footsteps, and for whatever reason, Archer's there. So she's fighting with Archer and notices his tattoo is the same image that Nehemia had drawn and said, "Do not trust." And it was a picture of, or a drawing of, Archer's tattoo. So she was saying, don't trust Archer. He reveals that he was the one that hired Graves to kill Nehemia because she left their movement and he thought that she would turn them into the king. Selena pretends that she's on his side and she's like, yeah, Nehemia never had to struggle like us. You know, putting on a show, and then she stabs him. They're fighting when this figure begins to emerge from the portal. So then we have Cale's point of view. Dorian runs to his room to get him to go to Selena's room with him. They go through the passage, find her on the ground, Archer's chanting from, in some language they don't know, from this book, and then Fleetfoot is facing off with this creature that came through the portal. Selena wakes up, Dorian's the one holding her, and Cale is fighting with this demon. Archer ends up running off with the book, and Cale tells them to run while he fights the demon off. So, Cale's point of view, he's accepting that he will die protecting his friends, and I just love him. And then Fleetfoot is then grabbed by this demon, dragged through the portal, and Cale jumps in after. So Selena ends up knocking out Dorian because she doesn't want him to see what's about to go down. And she jumps in after Cale to the portal, and her teeth elongate, her ears point in this realm. She's Fae. So Selena ends up fighting this demon with her powers, which appear to be fire. She tells Cale to run and then channels her power into Damaris and plunges it into the ground to crack the earth, which causes the creature to run away because the earth is just falling. The earth is falling apart. When she passes back through the portal into Aurelia, she's mortal again. We then get Dorian's POV, and he's conscious now, and he notices that Cale isn't helping Selena up, and he says that something feels off between them. So Selena can't close the portal because her power has been depleted, but she looks to Dorian and is like, can you help me? So this is the first time that Cale's kind of seeing that, wait, Dorian has some kind of power. She just needs his blood, and she's able to put sealing marks over the ones that she had used earlier, which makes the portal close. So she decides to go after Archer since there's only one way out in the direction that he went. So he went down to like the sewer exit, and she's like, yeah, I'm gonna go get some revenge. So she hears Archer struggling, cursing, and goes down to the sewer exit when she's attacked from behind. So they fight a little bit, and he says that Rourke Farron told him that killing Sam was the most fun he had ever had. She sees red, obviously, and she rams the pommel of her dagger into his jaw. He then begs to be let go. He's like, please, just let me go. And then she relents and tells him that he needs to leave Rifthold tonight. He then gives her a little smirk, like he got one over on her, and like he's proud of himself for manipulating her. And then he says, I knew you were a good woman. And she goes over to him and she says, I'm not, stabs him, and then goes, but Nehemia was. Mic drop. Are you fucking kidding me? That is just like chef's kiss. That was too good. We switched to Cale's point of view, and he had just watched her kill Archer, and she tells him that she owes him an explanation. Then the four of them, meaning Chaol, Dorian, Celaena, and Fleetfoot, are all seen by a healer. And Celaena tells Dorian she'll go to his rooms after she has a conversation with Chaol. So she's basically dismissing Dorian. And she's like, you can go. I'll go talk to you later. So she tells Chaol about her great-grandma, and her great-grandma was Fae, and had the ability to switch back and forth between... No, and she has the ability, meaning Celaena, to switch back and forth between her mortal and Fae form. They discuss Archer's involvement with everything and how he was trying to pit them against each other. And she says that she still can't trust Chaol, which is fair. So she's telling him, like, I recognize that Archer was the one manipulating all of this to happen, but I still don't feel like I can trust you. He promises not to tell anyone that she's Fae, and he almost drops the L-bomb, but she stops him and she's like, no, don't say that. She says she needs to prepare Archer's body to present to the king, and she leaves. Chaol then goes to his dad and asks him to support this idea that he's going to present to the king the next day, to send Celaena to Wendelin to kill the king and his heir. In exchange, he will leave his position as captain of the guard to go back to Aniel and be the heir. So Wendelin is the last stronghold of the Fae, and Chaol believes this will be the safest place for Celaena to be in. So he's trying to jump through all these hoops to make sure that she will be safe. I love him. We then get the king's point of view when Chaol presents his idea to send Celaena to Wendelin. We find out that the king sensed some portal was open the night before, and he's wondering who could have had that power to do that. And then he also notices that Baba Yellowlegs went missing mysteriously, but he saw some of her blood in her little caravan, so he's like, who could have killed her? He then summons Celaena and decides that she needs to leave tomorrow for Wendelin. We find out that the king has been breeding wyvern in the Farian Gap, and that's what's been happening there. Dorian is visibly upset with Chaol and his father. Celaena goes to the tomb and is visited by Elena, and she tells Celaena she will stop giving her demands when she stops running from her past. She tells her that she needs to go to Wendelin and do what needs to be done. That is the exact phrasing she uses. She says, do what needs to be done. So we have Chaol's point of view after all of this, and Dorian is pissed at him, but he can't tell Dorian the truth because then Dorian would know that she's Fae. So to keep Celaena as safe as possible, no one can know the real reason for him doing this. And if Dorian's mad at him, then he wouldn't oppose to Chaol going back to Aniel. So that all kind of works together. Then Celaena visits Nehemia's grave and promises to free Eelway. She slices her hand and makes this blood promise to free Eelway even if it's with her last breath. So then Dorian comes to say goodbye to Celaena. He tries to talk her out of this, but she's confident that she will not get caught, and she asks him to take care of Fleetfoot while she's gone. She thanks him for being her friend and says that she will come back for him. Okay. Celaena is then on the docks, and Chaol meets her there before she leaves. She has 5 minutes before the ship leaves, and she tells him about the word keys, word gates, the riddle, Baba Yellowlegs, everything that she had left out from before. And she ends up giving him the eye of Elena to protect him. She whispers some words in his ear that are apparently going to make him hate her forever once he understands. So he tells her that he loves her, and she says, I'm sorry. So the ship leaves, and she stares in his direction long after she can't see him, and he does the same. So then we have Chaol's point of view. So, oh my God. So she whispered a date into his ear. The date is the same one that she snapped in Endovier, the anniversary of her parents' death. So he goes to her room and he sees the royal genealogies book. After reading all of the stuff that's in there, he's able to put together, and this is the iconic line, that Celaena Sardathian wasn't in league with Aelin Ashriver Galathinius. Celaena Sardathian was Aelin Ashriver Galathinius, heir to the throne and rightful queen of Terrasen. Literally full body chills. Unfortunately, when I read this the first time, it was spoiled to me that Selena was Aelin, but this plot twist, so good. This was such a good plot point, and I love it that you're not even getting it till the end of book 2 going into book 3 of an 8-book series. I love this so much. But that is going to wrap up the chapter by chapter summary of everything that happens in Crown of Midnight by Sarah J. Maas. Thank you so much for watching. And for today, if you have made it this far, you are part of the Baddie Club. I don't make the rules, but you can either DM me, comment it on my most recent post. Today, we're going to do the door emoji because I was trying to get like an emoji for Mort, but we'll just do the door emoji. And yeah, you can check me out on Instagram. The podcast page is at bestfriend.bookclub. My personal one is going to be at Simply Serotonin. It's simply SARATONIN. TikTok at bestfriend.bookclub and at Simply Serotonin. Then we have video versions on YouTube at bestfriend.bookclub. All the things. And again, Patreon's going to be patreon.com/bestfriendbookclub podcast. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time. Bye.